For centuries, it has been the world's most enduring mystery, the ultimate quest. A city of legendary beauty, unparalleled wisdom, and catastrophic downfall. A place that has captured the human imagination like no other. We are talking, of course, about Atlantis. Was it a dazzling reality, a technological marvel lost beneath the waves? Or is it simply the greatest, most captivating myth ever told? Tonight, we peel back the layers of speculation, fantasy, and obsession. We journey not just across oceans, but through time to find the truth behind the lost city of Atlantis. Myth or reality? Part 1. The man who knew Plato's account. Our search for Atlantis begins not in the depths of the ocean, but in the pages of an ancient Greek philosopher, a man named Plato. In 400 BC, Plato, one of the most brilliant minds of all time, introduced the world to Atlantis in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He didn't just mention it. He gave a detailed, specific, and stunning account. Imagine, if you will, the hustle and bustle of ancient Athens. An old man, a wise statesman named Critias, tells a story he heard from his grandfather, who heard it from the great Athenian lawgiver, Solon. And where did Solon get the story? From Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. This detail is crucial. Plato framed the story not as a fable, but as history that had been carefully preserved. Plato describes Atlantis as an island nation, an empire of incredible power, situated beyond the Pillars of Heracles. For the ancient Greeks, the Pillars of Heracles were the Strait of Gibraltar, the gateway from the familiar Mediterranean Sea to the vast, unknown Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis, according to Plato, was an imperial powerhouse, a federation of 10 kings, all descendants of the sea god Poseidon himself. Their capital city was a wonder to behold, built on concentric circles of land and water, connected by tunnels for ships to pass through. The buildings were adorned with rare metals like orichalcum, which Plato described as being like the blaze of fire. They were a civilization of peace, harmony, and extraordinary wealth. The laws were just, their people virtuous. They possessed an abundance of everything, great harbors, massive armies, and a magnificent central temple dedicated to Poseidon. But, as is often the case with power, virtue was corrupted. Plato tells us that as the Atlanteans grew rich and powerful, they became consumed by greed and ambition. The divine spark in them faded. They began a campaign of conquest, setting their sights on the Mediterranean, including Athens. The ancient Athenians, in this account, stood alone against the mighty Atlantean navy, finally defeating the invaders. But the real drama, the great tragedy, was yet to come. In a single terrifying day and night, a disaster of unimaginable scale, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. Earthquakes and floods consumed the island, plunging the proud civilization into the depths, leaving nothing behind but an impenetrable muddy shoal. This is the account of Atlantis. It is incredibly detailed, highly specific, and presented by one of history's greatest thinkers as a factual record. And for 2,400 years, humanity has been obsessed. Did Plato invent this story, or was he reporting a real memory? Part 2. The Myth Hunters. The search begins. For a long time after Plato, Atlantis faded into legend. Most classical thinkers, including Plato's own student, Aristotle, dismissed the tale as a rhetorical device, a cautionary story used to illustrate the ideal society, Athens, versus the corrupt, failed society, Atlantis. But in the 19th century, the world changed. As archaeology became a serious science and as Europe expanded its reach across the globe, the appetite for ancient mysteries exploded. And one man reignited the flame of Atlantis like no other, Ignatius Donnelly. Donnelly was an American congressman, a populist, and a deeply passionate writer. In 1882, he published a sensational book, Atlantis, The Antediluvian World. Donnelly took Plato's account and presented it as literal, undeniable truth. He argued that Atlantis was the source of all human civilization, the mother culture. He claimed that the great similarities between the pyramids of Egypt, the pyramids of the Mayans in Central America, and the ancient ruins of the Near East could all be explained by a common source, the refugees of Atlantis who fled the cataclysm and spread their advanced knowledge across the globe. Suddenly, Atlantis wasn't just an old story. It was a global explanation. Donnelly's book became a runaway bestseller, injecting the myth into the modern psyche. The public became obsessed. This era gave birth to the modern myth hunter, the adventurer, the explorer, the one who truly believed that somewhere under the waves lay the rings of orichalcum. But the question remained, where? If Plato's location, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, was correct, the vast Atlantic Ocean was the primary target. Yet, geological science told a sobering truth. Continents do not simply sink. This forced historians and geographers to look closer at the specific details in Plato's story to seek a more realistic location. And the search led them, time and again, to the Mediterranean Sea. Part 3. The most likely candidate, the Minoan Connection, if we set aside the grandeur of a sunken continent in the middle of the Atlantic, and look for a real-world catastrophe that matches the description of Atlantis. A powerful island civilization destroyed in a single day, one location stands out above all others. This brings us to a beautiful volcanic island in the Aegean Sea, north of Crete, Thera, now known as Santorini. Imagine the year 1600 BC. The greatest civilization in the Aegean was not the Greeks, but the Minoans. They were a legendary maritime power based on the island of Crete, but their influence stretched across the sea. They were artists, traders, and engineers, living in opulent labyrinthine palaces. The Minoans were, in many ways, the real-life mirror of Plato's Atlantis, peaceful, powerful, and culturally dominant. And their trading hub, a magnificent outpost of their civilization, was the island of Thera. In the mid-17th century BC, a cataclysm occurred. The volcano on Thera erupted in one of the largest volcanic events in human history, the Minoan eruption, or Thera eruption. This was not a gentle lava flow. This was an explosion that was heard thousands of miles away. The very center of the island collapsed into the empty magma chamber beneath, creating a gigantic water-filled caldera, the crescent-shaped island of Santorini we see today. The effects were devastating. First, the volcanic ash. It blanketed the Aegean, disrupting agriculture for years. But the most destructive force was the tsunami. When the center of Thera vanished, it sent monumental waves, some estimated to be over 100 meters high, ripping across the Mediterranean. A massive wave crashed upon the shores of Crete, 70 miles away, destroying Minoan coastal settlements and crippling their great navy. This disaster did not destroy the Minoans overnight, but it was the death blow that broke their power and allowed others, like the Mycenaean Greeks, to eventually conquer them. Now, look at the evidence. A powerful island civilization. The Minoans fit the description of a sophisticated, dominant naval empire. A sudden catastrophe. The eruption destroyed an island in a single day and night, just as Plato wrote. Destruction by water. The primary cause of the Minoan Empire's collapse was a gigantic tsunami, a flood. For many historians, the connection is too strong to ignore. The theory is that the story of the Minoan eruption was passed down through time, from the Mycenaeans to the early Greeks, then to Solon, who heard it from the Egyptian priests. Over 900 years, the story was geographically relocated from the Aegean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean and embellished with moral lessons by Plato. The city didn't completely sink, but its primary hub, Thera, certainly collapsed and was swallowed by the sea. This theory offers a simple, powerful, and historically verifiable explanation for the core of the Atlantis story. Part 4. The geographical rivals beyond the pillars, yet the magic of the quest lies in the fact that not everyone is satisfied with the Minoan theory. Many believe that Plato's geographical specification beyond the Pillars of Heracles must be taken literally. This has driven explorers to the true Atlantic, leading to some of the most exciting and often controversial theories. The Straits of Gibraltar and Morocco. One popular area of focus in recent decades is the coastline of Spain and Morocco, just outside the Strait of Gibraltar. One theory centers on the Eye of the Sahara, a massive geological structure in Mauritania known as the Richat structure. It is an immense circular formation in the desert, perfectly matching Plato's description of the concentric rings of the Atlantean capital. It is located, arguably, near the Atlantic. Proponents argue that in Plato's time, this area might have been far wetter, a basin that flooded after a catastrophic event. However, geologists have confirmed that the Richat structure is a completely natural, non-catastrophic geological dome, not the remains of a massive city. It is stunning, but not Atlantean. The Caribbean and the Bimini Road. Another theory takes us far across the Atlantic to the Bahamas. In 1968, divers discovered a remarkable, straight-line formation of limestone blocks off the coast of Bimini, an island in the Bahamas. This became famously known as the Bimini Road. To believers, this was a sunken Atlantean harbor wall, perfectly laid, proving that a vast, lost continent lay submerged beneath the Caribbean. However, extensive geological studies have shown the Bimini Road to be a completely natural formation, a type of beach rock that breaks apart in an organized, block-like pattern due to tidal and wave erosion. It is, perhaps, the most famous geofact, a natural object mistaken for an artifact in the entire Atlantis saga. The true deep-sea search. The most romantic and heartbreaking theories place Atlantis deep in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. Geologists and oceanographers have meticulously mapped the ocean floor, particularly the mid-Atlantic ridge, where tectonic plates meet. Could an island the size of Atlantis have truly sunk? Modern science tells us, no, not in the way Plato described. Tectonic plate movement is slow, measured in millimeters per year. A large landmass does not simply disappear in a day and a night. Furthermore, the deep trenches of the Atlantic, where an island would have had to sink, are geologically stable. Yet, this scientific reality does not stop the dream. Every unexplained seismic reading, every strange underwater anomaly, every curious photo from a deep-sea submersible renews the hope that somewhere, down there, lies the truth. Part 5. Why the obsession? The myth's true power. So, after 2.5 millennia of searching, what is the answer? Is Atlantis a myth, or is it a reality? The consensus among mainstream historians and archaeologists is clear. Atlantis is a moralizing myth created by Plato, likely inspired by a real historical disaster, the Minoan eruption, but not a literal sunken continent of orichalcum and advanced technology. But to stop there would be to miss the true power of the story. The story of Atlantis is not just about a lost city. It is about us. It tells us something fundamental about the human condition. Think about why this story is so deeply embedded in our hearts. 1. The cautionary tale. Atlantis is the ultimate story of hubris. They were too successful, too arrogant, and they were punished for it. It is a timeless reminder that wealth, power, and technology do not guarantee survival. It warns against the arrogance of empires and the dangers of moral decay. We look at Atlantis and see our own potential for self-destruction. 2. The lost golden age. Humans have an emotional need for a golden age, a time when things were better, purer, and wiser. Atlantis represents that perfect Eden-like society, lost forever. The search for Atlantis is the search for a better past that we can never reclaim. It's an emotional attachment to the idea of perfection. 3. The hope of discovery. In a world where maps are complete, where every mountain has been climbed, Atlantis remains the last great geographical mystery. It represents the hope that there is still something miraculous out there, something waiting to be discovered that will fundamentally change our understanding of history and humanity. It fuels the explorer in all of us. The emotional power is immense. Imagine the pride of the Atlantean kings, the beauty of their canals, the terrifying moment the earth began to shake, and the sea began to rush in. That sense of total loss, that sudden plunge into darkness, is what hooks the human heart. It is simple, yet gorgeous in its tragedy. Part 6. The Atlantis Legacy. The search continues. The legacy of Atlantis is everywhere. It inspired the concept of utopia, a perfect society. It drove the spiritual movement of theosophy, which claimed the Atlanteans were a race of super beings. It appears in countless books, films, and video games, often depicted as a source of forgotten advanced technology. Today, the search continues, driven less by Donnelly's literal interpretation and more by deep-sea archaeology and modern geological science. We have learned that the real Atlantises of history are not sunken continents, but real places that have been lost or buried. Pavlopetri, a Bronze Age city submerged off the coast of Greece. The ancient city of Heraclean Thonis, found submerged beneath the sands of Egypt's Abu Qir, Port Royal. The wickedest city on earth, swallowed by an earthquake and tsunami in Jamaica in 1692. These real sunken cities prove that catastrophic loss is not only possible, but has happened throughout history. They are the fragments of truth that keep the Atlantis dream alive. So where do we stand? The historical truth is almost certainly the Minoan eruption on Thera. It is a real event that fits the core narrative of an island empire consumed by a sudden watery catastrophe. But the emotional truth, the reason we are still talking about it today, is that Atlantis is a myth. It is a story so perfect, so resonant with our fears and our dreams that we simply do not want it to be fiction. We want to believe in a golden age. We want to believe in an ultimate mystery. We want to believe that the map of the world still has a hidden X on it. And so, the greatest treasure of Atlantis is not gold, orichalcum, or ancient technology. The greatest treasure is the quest itself, the unquenchable human desire to explore, to question, and to chase a history that is just beyond our grasp. The lost city of Atlantis may never be found in the Atlantic abyss. But as long as we tell the story, as long as we look at the sea and wonder what lies beneath, Atlantis will never truly be lost. Closing. It is the story of a perfect beginning, a terrible corruption, and a single swift moment of annihilation. It is simple. It is gorgeous. It is the history we yearn to recover. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the legend of the Lost City.